Greetings, y'all, and welcome to Obscuria Filmcast, where we discuss obscure films that we love. Today, we have a very special episode where we are going to be doing our year in review. This is our first anniversary. We have about 21 films at this point that we've reviewed, and we're going to talk about them. But first, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and comment on the video. We really appreciate your support, and so we're gonna get right into it. The way this podcast has been run is that every week each one of us selects a film for everybody to watch, and then we talk about it, and then we keep rotating. The very first film that we chose was by our man Seth Michael May over here, and that was episode 1, Orca, 1977. Seth, tell us a little bit about Orca, why you chose it. And
Orca is the greatest film opera epic ripoff of Jaws ever made. And it's also, if you read the novelization, the favorite novelization of any movie, according to Quentin Tarantino. I guess unless he's comparing it to his own novelization of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But that was a time when novelizations didn't have to be anything like the movie, and evidently the novelization work is completely different, which is why he loves it. You got Richard Harris, you got Charlotte Rampling, you got Joe Sampson, you got Bo Derek in her first role, and you got a very angry, revengeful killer whale. And I think it holds up with movies like Blackfish. I would do a Blackfish Orca double feature. What else? And it's got a beautiful score. Even if you don't like the movie, there's something wrong with you if you don't like the score by the great maestro Ennio Morricone. And that's what I can say in like 1 minute about Orca. It's the bomb.
Yeah, well,
funny thing. Well, I'm just saying. I just want.
What? Go ahead, Sean.
The budget was $6 million and the box office was 14. So in terms, it was successful, not a hit. And Seth, I would hate to say,
but it was critically panned.
9% critic score, 33% audience. That's not that good. Even when Seth recommended the movie, I remember it, and he's like, Orca.
Yeah.
And my mind was like, no, you're not going to make me watch that. But I did. And thank you, Seth. It really is a wonderful movie. And yes, a Jaws ripoff. And there were a lot of them, even though this one was more interesting because it went to Richard Harris and his whole Irish thing. And even the way that they did the whole horror violence of the animal, at least it was creative, because Jaws is good. But 1 hour of Jaws, the second hour of Jaws, it's 3 dudes on a boat. That's what it is.
I gotta say something. I saw these two films kind of close together. Like, I didn't grow up. I didn't see Jaws growing up. I watched Jaws for the first time, like from beginning to end. Actually, after I saw this, I like this better than Jaws. I mean, I think it's a better movie. I know that probably most people won't agree with me, but anyway, I don't have much to add. What about you, Judy? What do you think?
I would just say it's a darker film than Jaws. Jaws is very commercial, very likable by a wide audience. Jaws is the movie that I ask people, like, do you like horror? And they say no. And I say, well, do you like Jaws? And they say, yeah. And I say, well, then you do like some horror. But I think Orca takes a different, darker turn in both the human characters and in the whale itself. And for me, my experience of Orca is it's now that film that my daughter references because she watched the end with me, and she always is talking about, remember the whale? Do whales eat people? So now I don't watch any horror movies at all, even if it's in short bits. It's just, you never know what goes down a child's mind. So
yeah.
Yay, Orca.
All right,
Yay, Orca.
Cool. All right, so let's keep it moving. We got episode 2. That was Conan the Destroyer, 1984, selected by Sean. Sean, take it away.
Conan the Destroyer is a sequel to an excellent film, Conan the Barbarian, but Conan the Destroyer is more of a movie. Conan the Barbarian is more of a film. I'm the cinema goer that can appreciate both camps. 1. 2, it was fascinating. I loved the music, was amazing. It was like something you could hear at a wedding. It was epic. It made you feel epic, especially as a kid with a stick in the yard pretending it's a sword. doing the whole thing, and I remember going like this, and like this. It's like that's how they have in the movie. He's like this, and I would do that. It was very inspirational. It explored this fantastical world. It had one whole sequence where the princess gets kidnapped, and like the band of thieves got to go in this crystal palace with a mirror monster in the end. And to me, that's just amazing cinema. Yeah, it's campy. Yeah, it's hokey, but it's made very well. You get really into it, and there's some funny parts. And even to have this cast together is just nuts. Like there wasn't Grace Jones didn't do a lot. Will Chamberlain didn't do a lot. It was Olivia Diabo's first film, and the other thief, Tracy Walter, is Jack Nicholson's best friend. I always like that fun fact. Along with Mako, who actually reprises his role from the original. And they have a wizard fight and other great sword fights. And there was a smack dab of feminism in there around the fire scene. Thank you.
Right on.
It has a great wizard fight, and it's not just a wizard fight. It's an acting teacher fight. It's the two acting teachers of LA, two of the biggest one. Mako was an acting teacher, and Jeff Corey was an acting teacher. He was actually the guy who, when they told Leonard Nimoy to go back to acting classes, he went to Jeff Corey's class. And they had this sort of Tai Chi kind of wizard battle with each other, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And only topped by the wizard battle in Wizards, which we'll get to in a bit. And who did Olivia Diabo date? Which rock stars? She dated
all of them.
She was Donovan's daughter, right? No, she dated. I don't remember. I think she dated.
She had a sister too, who was a Bond girl.
Who was in Wonder Years? Was that Olivia or her?
Was that Olivia?
Sister?
That's Olivia.
That's Olivia. Okay, yeah.
And she was the nemesis in Law and Order: Criminal Intent. She played Nicole Wallace. Love that character. All right.
Yeah, I liked
Abram,
it.
Did the film grow on you?
Yeah, I mean, it's goofy, like childlike fun as far as I'm concerned, and I like the colors and the sort of this glistening '80s set design that's very over the top, and probably felt at the time like it was really cutting edge, but kind of is cheesy, but it still looks really awesome. I don't really have much more. It's a fun movie. I don't have anything more to add than that.
Yeah,
Judy?
I agree. It's fun. It's very testosterone-y. I'm thinking of, it's one of those films where there's a lot of characters walking around in very limited clothing with excellent chiseled bodies, both male and female. And another little gem of this movie that I remember is, in some films, I enjoy watching the background actors because they're very animated. And there's a few fight scenes where the background actors just kind of, maybe it's just me, but stole the show just like a little bit in a few moments. It did go back to the main actors. But if you watch those battle scenes, just sort of like check out the supporting cast. Okay.
Cool.
And the Dalgoth scene with the horn was a great sequence too. All right, I'm done.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right, next up we got episode 3, The Tenant, 1976, Roman Polanski. I selected this one. I didn't realize it at the time, but this actually has a pretty high critic and audience rating. But it's not a very well-known film. It's one of Roman Polanski's first films that he made in exile, and it's sort of it's very Kafka-esque, and I love Franz Kafka. A lot of the stuff in it doesn't really make sense, and like the story doesn't really make much sense. But it's just it seemed like an allegory for a man's descent. An outsider immigrant's descent into madness in a society that doesn't accept him. It has a lot of sort of Jewish existential philosophical themes in it. Roman Polanski was a Holocaust survivor. This film seems to explore a lot of the darkness of being like an outsider, and I think I think he's trying to explore his being basically spit out of Europe in his early life, and then being embraced by America, but then being spit out by America for reasons that many would argue are his own fault. But he definitely had a really rough life, and this film is sort of it seems to be autobiographical. He's quite a good actor, and most people probably don't know his acting very well because he's only had like bit roles in other films, but he stars in this film. It seems like a deeply personal film, and if you love Roman Polanski and you like weird, surreal storylines that are humorous, then you might like this film. That's all I got. I mean, Roman Polanski's a master on some level. If you love film, there'll be something in this that you find interesting.
Yeah, I'll go next. I enjoyed the film style. It has a very specific style to it. It keeps the tone. It's a little bit dark. It's a little bit weird. It's a little bit sort of what's going on. It's the surrealness that you mentioned. And yeah, it's one of those where you still go, what was reality, what was not? You look back on it and you could sort of sit there and play it a few different ways. So I don't think that the movie is for everybody, because I think some people want a little bit more milk toast. They want to know what's going on, and this isn't that film. But if you do like film, it's a well done film.
Cool.
This
I'll
one
go
grew
next.
on me. Oh, you go next? Whatever.
Oh yeah, really, really quick. The Tenant is the DVD you find in the DVD bin at the supermarket. They don't do that anymore, but way back when they would have bins, barrels of DVDs, and you'd find the Tenant in there. I guess some sort of licensing thing. I couldn't find how much the budget was, but it made $5 million. I don't know how. Also, it's one of the highest rated movies we've reviewed. It's the second highest. And I don't know how that happened either. So the critic is 88, the audience is 87. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical. And yeah, I guess it's like a big allegory, but I was surprised that Roman Polanski is a fine actor. I was really surprised how good he was, but I'll never watch it again. Thank you.
Well, but then at least like, I mean, that you would even grant it, that is like, I think, pretty gracious, because you're saying it was basically a terrible film with an amazing performance from the lead. How terrible could it have been if the performance of the lead was so good?
All right.
I don't know. I remember watching it going, this is really hard to get through. But I can't stop thinking about this movie, like when he's cross-dressing, the Egyptian runes on the toilet, the neighbors who are just like kind of weird, but it kind of makes sense if you've ever like gone to an Airbnb in like a big apartment building complex and you've had to stay the weekend there, or gone to a youth hostel where most of the people seem to be very comfortable living in the hostel and you feel like you're only going to be here for the weekend. It reminded me of that. But I remember when I watched it, I didn't feel like any of this. I was like, why are we watching this? But of the films we've watched, I think about it probably the most of anything. So, yeah.
And in the movie, he only uses the bathroom once. That's a fact.
Really?
Okay.
Because it feels like he's in there forever.
He goes in all
Once.
the time.
No, he doesn't.
Oh, he doesn't.
Because
Oh,
he
he just keeps
discovers
looking
the
at it.
hieroglyphics
Yeah.
after he's been there for a week. I'll stop.
Right.
There's no restroom in the apartment, I thought.
Yeah, it's an efficiency.
Yeah.
So I know I have friends who still live in apartments like that in New York City.
That's the fancy name
You can
for
get
bathroom down the
you can get
hall.
an efficiency apartment for under $1,000, still in Manhattan.
Wow.
Nice.
Anyway, moving on. All right, next we have episode 5, Wizards, 1977.
Four.
No, you skipped me. You skipped me.
Burnt
skipped
offerings.
it. Oh no, I screwed up. Sorry.
Yeah.
Episode 4. Sorry, Judy.
Okay.
Not episode
Because
5.
burnt offerings
Episode
is haunted.
4, yeah, episode 4, Burnt Offering.
The haunted
Offerings,
movie.
1976. That was Judy's selection.
Yes, it was my first selection. This is always the film that is like my go-to when people ask me to, check out some favorite that I have. I always think of Burnt Offerings, and then I think of why. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed watching it, and I hadn't watched it in many years. It's a 1976 horror film. I love 70s horror. It's directed by Dan Curtis. It's based off of a novel by Robert Marasco with Oliver Reed and Karen Black. And it's a little bit, if you're into The Shining, it's similar to that. And correct me if I'm wrong, was it shot before The Shining?
Like a year before.
Yes,
right?
all of
Yeah.
it. The book
Okay.
and the movie was all before The Shining. The
It was all
Shining is
before The Shining,
inspired
and
by
there's
this.
a lot of starting out in the car. There's just a lot of it, and The Shining happens to be my favorite film, so that there's probably a correlation there. And it's also another one of those films where at the end you're left thinking like, wait, what exactly happened? Like, what happened, but you don't know exactly what happened. Like, because spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it yet, basically the house is consuming anyone that comes into it, and it goes back into like the family history with photos. But I still couldn't tell you exactly what happened, but it's basically like the house is like eating the souls of the people, but it's done in a very poetic and not on the nose type way. And the acting is like, at times you watch it and you're like, is this bad acting? But it's actually good. And so you're sort of like, oh, I'm not sure. Anyway, love to hear what you guys think.
Well,
Yeah.
Oliver Reed is the best whisperer, except for Charlotte Rampling in Orca. So those two, they're whispering English actors, because usually they yell. So you got that. And Oliver Reed, I mean, is a legend. You just, died drinking, trying to outdrink people in a pub in Malta during Gladiator. Karen Black is arguably the sexiest woman with a lazy eye. That one eye is always looking at, right? It's hot.
She's pretty hot.
And Burgess Meredith's character is so like, is he just old and weird? Is he old and weird and gay? Is he old and weird and asexual? Is he having a relationship with his sister and the mother upstairs that Karen Black has to take care of? Oh, and Betty Davis is in this movie too. The great legend Betty Davis. I think it was one of her last roles.
Yeah.
And she's fantastic in it. But I guess this begins. No, really. I guess Conan Destroyer begins technically our H.P. Lovecraft theme.
I guess.
Of the horror of the unknown, cosmic horror that we keep going through.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go. Judy was saying that the house was haunted. I believe it was the estate, because the plants also attacked him. So if you're going to give me some rules, stick to the rules. Second, Burgess Meredith was old for 50 years of his life somehow. I don't know how that happened. He was old in 1972. He was old in 1996. I don't know how that happened. Anyway.
He was kind of old in Twilight Zone, and that was like 1915, 19.
And he was in Grumpy Old Men in 95. I don't get it. Anyway. But it was nice to see Karen Black. She is pretty hot. And it was nice to see Oliver Reed as a father. He doesn't really play a father. And it was nice to see that the acting was done well. And even though I looked up the author is more of a professor. This was the only thing he ever wrote. And it got made into a movie, and it was completely The Shining. Stephen King completely ripped this movie off. I don't care what anybody has to say.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, that's like, I think the highest praise that you can give this movie is that the film and the book both came out before the film and book of The Shining came out. And I don't know if he ripped it off or not, but, because I think the idea of like a haunted house movie where the house is like kind of consuming you, like that's a pretty broad theme. I think, that's something that's like part of the, like that's like an archetypal type of horror theme. But there are so many striking resemblances thematically that it's hard to believe that they didn't see it. That Kubrick wasn't, somewhat influenced by it, or that, that Stephen King wasn't somewhat influenced by either the book or the film. I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of parallels there. And so if you like The Shining and you've never heard of this movie, you definitely have to see this film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next, we got Abram.
Next up, we got episode 5. That is our first animated film called Wizards, 1977. Seth?
1977, which was an important year for film because it was the year that Star Wars came out and changed everything, just like Jaws had the year before. So important that this movie was going to be called Wizard Wars, but there was a meeting between Lucas and Bakshi, because Bakshi was that important at this point, to rename it just Wizard, so it wouldn't confuse people who went to, well, I already saw Wizards War, why do I have to see Star Wars, or are they the same movie? But basically, this is the greatest family film with hookers, footage from a Triumph of the Will, Nazis, Adolf Hitler's in the movie, mutants, topless fairies,
Murder?
Nipple. What else?
Murder.
Yeah, swastikas with jumping skulls around, and it has a wizard war also, and it has a wizard's duel. And it's basically in the far flung future. There's a war between two brothers, one representing magic, the other representing technology, and they duke it out. And I think you could argue the inspiration for Boba Fett is in this movie too, Necron 99. So I liked it. And they shot Fritz.
Yeah.
Those dirty stinking fairies. They killed Fritz. Is in it too.
Yeah.
I'll go next. I thought it was just very odd that they used Nazi footage. To me, it was a little odd and maybe a little cheap that, wait, we need to get 7 more minutes in the movie to be 90 minutes. Let's just put in some Nazis and it'll be a political thing. The audience will, it's political because we have Nazis and it's war. I thought that was a little nuts. I did like the animation because it was low budget. The budget was $2 million and the box office was $9 million, and $2 million, I guess. I mean, they put it together. It was a creative tour de force. And Seth was right that it is like a Disney movie that's not Disney, which is rare. It's always been rare to have something for kids that's not Disney. I always like to check those things out.
For kids.
Not for kids.
It was rated G at the time, though.
I believe it. I believe it was intended to be for kids and family. It is not a kids movie.
Yeah, parents
People were out of their minds in the 70s is when people completely fucking lost their minds in this country. Like that's when the culture was like probably the most twisted that it's ever been, on every level. And this is a new genre of film. This is like Ralph Bakshi's out of his fucking mind. I'm going to just say it. Ralph, if you're listening, you're out of your mind. And I love you. And this film, it's like Ralph Bakshi invented a genre. It's like pornographic satire or satirical pornography. I'm not sure which one it is.
It's like hentai.
Mixed with like hentai. Yeah, it is out there. If you like animation and you like fairy tales that are whimsical and take really random sharp twists in the storyline when you least expect it, and you want really striking animation, watch all of his movies, but start with this one. This is your gateway drug to Ralph Bakshi. That's what I got to say about that.
And it's got the first voiceover acting by Mark Hamill in this movie.
Oh yeah,
wow.
I forgot about
Sean,
that.
the Prince of Starlight, the Knights of Starlight Fairies guardian. So
nice.
Well, I like anything that has fairies, but I did find it difficult to get through this film. As a mother, unless my child is like under 2 and is just like, oh, pretty moving objects on screens, I would not show it to a child that can understand almost anything. Right. And I think I vaguely, does it have good music? Or interesting music?
It is interesting. It's weird.
it's interesting.
Okay.
It's
I
not
remember
good.
something about the music, but I also remember it being very jarring at times. It was like kind of one of those things where you're jumping from scene to scene and you're like, is this the same movie?
Yeah,
Nazi
exactly.
tank.
That's what I meant by the sharp twists that randomly.
It's just like, what am I watching?
That's
like,
Ralph
I like that
Bakshi.
part. I don't like this part.
Yeah, that's
So it was
Ralph
just,
Bakshi.
it was a little bit jarring. Definitely interesting.
Everything about the movie's jarring. Everything.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting watch. Like if you want to sit with a group of friends and be like, let's like smoke some weed or like mushroom. I don't even do any of that. But if I did, I'd be like, we're watching Wizards.
It's definitely a psychedelic film.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. All right,
What's
keep it
next?
moving. Next up, we have episode 6. Romeo Is Bleeding, 1993. Sean, take it away. Why did you choose this film?
Because it's cinematic genius. I remember my mom rented this thing from a video rental store. Google what that used to be. She rented it. I liked it. She's like, Sean, watch this. I liked it so much. I bought it on VHS back when it was $20 a VHS, and it, good luck getting $20. But then I got also the soundtrack, and I listened to it, and the soundtrack's like fusion jazz. I'm not into fusion jazz. blues, I guess, but fusion jazz, I'm not. But I listened to this with my Discman. I drained its batteries. I thought it's fascinating. I've seen it like 15 times, rewatching it again. I enjoyed how it was like an exploration in like male sexuality and ego. And I'll tell you this, there's not a lot of stories about that, because it's just, it wasn't a happy ending. It was very sad. And I thought it was just fascinating. You don't see Michael Wincott a lot, and I always liked him. I always liked him. And Gary Oldman was fantastic. Annabella Sciorra is gorgeous, beautiful, and powerful. I really liked her. Her outfits. Juliette Lewis was fantastic in this weird way. I like the ending, and it's one of those old film noirs that don't really have a conclusion, but a twist ending, and everybody's just worse. All the characters are just worse. Like their lives get ruined. You saw their lives get ruined watching the story. I just got another Dashiell Hammett book, and it's like I got some of his short stories. It's like that, which I also enjoy because it's a nice artistic ending that doesn't, that just is just kind of sad and poignant. Thank you.
Yeah. This is for me probably one of the movies that's kind of stuck in my head the most. I did not enjoy it while I was watching it because I didn't like the pacing and the storytelling. It was too much. I mean, it's like a noir film, and there's so much going on, and I couldn't process it watching it the first time. I'm not sure. I'm gonna probably go back and watch it again because I will say one thing about this film, and it's not hyperbole. The film has the greatest cinematography, the most interesting shots I've ever seen in my life. The shots are so like unique and artistic, and like they're like abstract art. The use of mirrors and reflection. I mean,
lenses.
I cannot describe. I can't really do it justice how good the shots are in this film. That's what I think disappointed me so much because I couldn't get into the story. It was too muddled for me, but that's how film noir is. So like I had to watch The Big Sleep like 10 times before I could make any sense of it. So maybe I have to do the same thing with this film. But if you see but for no other reason than simply just how gorgeous and creative the shots are, that would be reason alone to watch this movie. It's like a clinic in cinematography. That's all I got.
Seth?
I'll go. I thought this was probably the most beautiful cinematography of any of the films we watched. Probably the shots are like, when you go to like photography wing at the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art, and you just look at shot upon shot and stills, and they're all beautiful. The cinematography is like this. This was edited by Walter Murch, right? Was this edited by Walter? Yeah, he's one of the greatest editors ever. The lingerie in this movie is fabulous. All the costumes are fabulous, but the lingerie, especially in this movie, is great. But I don't find myself thinking about this movie any more than I didn't like watching it because the same reason that Isaac mentions, and it doesn't rattle in my head as much as the Tenant did. So I gotta stick to my guns on this and say I like everything about it, but this story made it seem doesn't stick in my head as anything special, even though the performances are good.
It was also, let me mention, box office bomb. Budget was 10 million, box office 3.3. That's horrible. Judy?
It's also written by a woman. So there's that. And what I remember from it is that there was something about the wife's character that I didn't like. And I want to say, and I think this might actually be good for the writer, right? The characters I almost want to say were very stereotypical or maybe one-dimensional, but they're not. They're not at all. I think they just have a very specific point of view. So I think it's really interesting that you talked about how it's the sexuality of a male and it's written by a woman. And I think the biggest takeaway for me from this film, and as I've mentioned before, like I love films that I watch and then I think about as I, over the next few days, I sort of mull over, or it leaves me feeling sort of emotional in some sort of sense. And I remember at the end, it was like, I wanted him to have a happy ending, but I knew he didn't deserve it. So I was sort of torn with which direction it was going to go. And I was like, but I found myself sort of like wanting that like Disney-esque happy ending, happy ever after, like finally she arrives, right? And it wasn't. And I was like, yeah, exactly. That's how it should be, right? That's life. That's like real life, right? Because he fucked up. Yeah.
You should watch Scarlet Street. That ending will mess you up. I'm not kidding. Edward G. Robinson. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right, moving on. We got episode 7, The Beastmaster, 1982. With we had a special guest on the panel that night, Tony Arkin. This is misattributed to me. This was actually Seth's selection.
I thought it was Tony's, but we have a debate.
Or it's Tony's selection. Okay.
Yeah,
fine.
I thought it was Tony's.
Yeah, you threw it out to Tony. That's right. That's right.
And Tony says it's me, and
But it's your guest.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, but it was your guest. So,
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what this movie means to you, Seth.
So The Beastmaster is a movie that a lot of people saw on HBO, which means HBO stands for Hey, Beastmaster's on, because it would be on so many times. People would hear that, and they'd be like, hey, Beastmaster's on. And it's HBO. I saw it on Channel 11, so I missed 2 of the best things in the movie the first time I saw it, which are Tanya Roberts' boobies.
She was pretty hot too.
This is a movie about, it's basically the Star Wars plot, but in a Conan the Barbarian world, where a man, through some weird magic and his father throwing a magical like device, stops a ritual where this kid is born of a cow who should be born of a queen. And as a result, he can talk to the animals like Dr. Dolittle psychically, and he helps take the kingdom back with a dyed tiger, a hawk that couldn't really fly. They had to put it up in a balloon with baskets because they got bargain basement, 2 ferrets, and that's the menagerie, right? A dyed tiger, 2 ferrets, and a hawk.
And shout out to my sister. She named her pet ferrets, after these ferrets in this
Odo
movie.
and Coda.
Yeah.
Odo and Coda, yeah. And it's got a really great fake nose by Rip Torn.
Yeah, Rip Torn.
Rip Torn.
Oh, God.
Rip Torn doing his best Shylock impersonation.
Okay, let me go. Oh, you forgot John Amos. Oh,
And John Amos.
man. He's
John Amos dressed like, fuck you. You would not associate me with good times anymore.
He's ebony brilliance. He is a beautiful man. Honestly, gorgeous. But so there's that. I remember this movie as a kid. It made me sick. It made me ill because of the larvae in the ears and the berserkers. It made me ill. There were some continuity errors, but that's okay because you're dealing with kids. They did have one forced perspective shot. Bless their heart, they tried. They did make a little town, and the way they did it, God bless Mark Singer, who you see every single muscle in his body, every single one, every scene. And he did sequels. He did a 3rd one for TV. He's still 6-pack, still all of it. It did. The budget was $5 million. The box office was 14. So it was. That was a hit. It's 3 times its budget. Basically, it's a hit. I think there were some toys. There was a cartoon. It had a sequel, Portal Through Time, where Beastmaster comes to the present day and he meets a rocker chick and they go on an adventure. And then the 3rd one is way back during the times the movie took place originally, and like the Iron Age, I guess. And it goes into that realm too, but that was in like the mid 90s. So this franchise has been around for a while. And one of the things I liked is when John Amos was with his little apprentice and Beastmaster comes and scares them. John Amos and the little apprentice flipped their staffs in Syncopation. And I was like, that's a good movie, because the director's like, wait a second, it's not working. What do we need? Just go like this at the same time, print it, move it. It was that type of creativity works. Even when remember in the beginning, like the house on the stilts fell down, that really happened. They had to take the camera. They were filming a scene. They heard the thing coming down. They're like, oh, and they just turned and filmed it. caught it coming down, but they got it, and God bless their hearts. Thank you.
This is
Yeah.
Stanley Kubrick's cinematographer, right? Isn't it?
Something like that.
I believe it is. I think Tony mentions that. And we also got our first real trolls on our.
Oh yeah,
on
we
this
got.
ep-
This is the first episode that we did where a bunch of internet trolls were giving us shit.
I think they're
we-
all
we-
young
we-
people who come from a generation where if they like a movie, why should we be ripping the movie apart? But I want to say we love this movie.
Yeah,
and
we
that's
love this
why-
movie. I was
that's why we get it.
traumatized
We
by this.
weren't-
I was traumatized by this movie when I was 5 years old, and I didn't remember why. But then it all came flooding back to me when I saw it for the first time in 20 some odd years. Yeah, it's the child sacrifice shit that freaked me out when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That's not for kids. So, but,
The
but
fire?
that image,
Yeah.
like I was like, oh, I remember that. I really didn't like that when I was little. I had to turn away. My sister watched this movie. She's like 8 years older than me. She watched this movie obsessively. Like I said before, she named her ferrets after the ferrets in this movie. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything else. It's an awful film. It's an awful movie, and I love it.
I just keep thinking about his oiled up chest. It's just like he's walking and it's just he's always oily and glistening and perfect pecs.
Judy likes that.
So
oily
do
physique.
I.
It just makes me like, oh, it's pretty to look at. I don't need to talk to him. Anyway, it's a whole another episode. So yes. So Abram, I was also traumatized as a child and I can't remember why. And I remember looking back and going, yeah, I remember this movie when I was little and the ferret died. You know, like did the ferret live? They looked for the ferret. Did the ferret make it? And, and the ferret saved them. And I have no idea what else happened in the movie. That is my only memory of it. And I just remember being like so horrified by it.
Yeah.
And when I watched this movie, I was like, oh my God, this is the movie. So probably not. Yeah, given that I think you and I are probably about the same age, it's probably not good for any child like under 7, I'm going to say, if you have kids. So maybe over 7, given the child sacrifices and the animal deaths. I think kids really are, judging by my daughter too, like they're very sensitive to like the animal stuff, more so than the people. It's like the animal violence or cruelty. They just really, latch onto that. So that's all I got. Again, I was like, when are we going to end with the testosterone films? So that's what I say. So can we move on to my pick?
Yeah,
Yes.
I was going to say. So moving on. Speaking of ending the testosterone films.
Yes.
We have episode 8. We Are What We Are, 2013, brought to you by Judy.
So this was one of my favorite horror films of the year. I consider it as a drama horror, a little bit of a thriller. So if you like, or if you don't think you like horror because you're not into those, torture porn, slasher, bloody films, this might be for you. It does have some moments of gore, but on the overall, it's a very beautifully shot film, wonderfully acted. It stars Julia Garner, who it was one of her earlier films, and now she is very popular for being the star of Inventing Anna. Do you accept wire transfers? But it was one of her earlier films, and there's just it's a slow film. So I know when I watched it with my husband, he was like, "The guys are gonna hate you." That was what he said. The first 20 minutes, "The guys are gonna hate you for picking this film." But it really picks up. It's kind of got a slow start to figure out what's going on. It is about cannibalism. But if you stay and watch the whole film, especially the ending, the acting is just so good. It's so creepy. And there's just when I can say spoilers here, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you haven't seen it, stop now. But when the children are eating their father, there are some moments that are just so brilliantly done where you're like, no, they did that. And there's just these little, I don't know if it was the acting or the director, where like just things that they do with their hair, or like picking up a piece of skin and eating it without saying it. There's a lot of, especially with the acting, there's not as much, it's not dialogue heavy. So it's a lot of tense, and it's just a lot of the presence of the actors. So I would say the actors all around did a great job, and it's directed by Jim Mickle. So you guys can take it away now.
Cool.
I loved everything about this movie. I love everything about it. I love the fact that Bill Sage and I did a short film together, and he barged into who's the father in this movie, and he barged into my room accidentally, and I was sprawled out, he says, like Burt Reynolds on the cover of Playgirl magazine, and that night, and he's in it, and I think if I could make this movie any better for anyone, if you have a friend who's on the Atkins diet or the paleo diet, invite them over to your house, make a meal exactly like they like, lamb and a side dish of chicken and some salmon, lay it all out, no carbs, and just watch this movie and dig in with your fingers. It's a great film.
Yeah, I concur. This is the first film I think that we did that gets close, that comes close to being perfect. And I think the pacing is excellent. And it's okay that the pacing is slow in the beginning because it's interesting. As long as you keep me curious about what happens next, I don't care if it's slow. And I wouldn't say it's a terribly slow film. It's just it's a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a
burner.
It's
a slow burn.
No, it's a very
Kind of like a long fuse.
It's a very economical film. It doesn't do more than it needs to do. It gives you just enough in every bite to keep you wanting more. And I like thriller type films. I like films where the tension increases throughout the film. That's something that I really enjoy. I think it's a very difficult type of style of writing to pull off. Most people don't have the skill to do it. I think this film does that beautifully. And then also, the acting is incredible. The cinematography is incredible. Like, this is the first film where I'm like, I love the story, I love the screenplay, I love the photography, I love the acting. So that's why I'd say it's as close to perfect as we've gotten so far. And it's a quintessential film that fits into this category of obscure because, I mean, it got some, good, decent critical review. The audience is like, but it did horribly in the box office.
Horribly.
It didn't really even get a chance, is what.
Yeah, they didn't give it a chance.
Also,
they also marketed it wrong. I think
they marketed it wrong. It's also based on this is a redo of a Mexican film, which I don't remember exactly how they translated it into Spanish. But if you look it up,
Somos lo que hay.
Lo que hay.
Lo que hay. Somos lo que hay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm up. I think it is a direct translation. I watched the first 20 minutes of the Mexican film thinking Judy recommended a Mexican film, and I'm like, no. And I searched again. But I did see like how the Mexican film was for 20 minutes, and they had the kids in the city. But I did like the adaptation. If it's going to be American, might as well put them in the country. And that was a good choice. I agree with Abram, how he said economical. I mean, I guess in the story and the acting and stuff, but also in the shots, because they really planned out these shots. And those lenses were, you couldn't really move a lot because those are some very specific lenses that they had, which I appreciate. And you have to rehearse the scenes. What Judy was saying about the last sequence where the two daughters eat the father, they did some weird, they cooked some Jello stuff and they really told the girls to get in there, and they did. It was like acting class at the Actor Studio Method. Now you're a tiger, go. And they went, and it did freak me out because they did get close-ups of like the crumbling flesh and stuff, and it did creep me out. And they lingered on it too, and the noises that they were making. Also about the box office, it only opened in 2 theaters. About
like I said, it didn't even have
13 for like a month, but it did get an 86% critics. The Tenant got 1 higher, but it also had I just kind of like the sex scene between the blonde and Russell Wyatt, who's a royalty. Anyway, they just had a little kiss and then pants off, they're fucking in the graveyard. Like, that's it. I'm like, wait, this is the sex scene? They don't get to second base, barely first, and then I just thought it was a little nuts. I guess that's how they do it in the country. But yeah, but Russell Wyatt, I think he's Kurt Russell's no, his name is Wyatt Russell. I spelt it wrong.
Oh.
Sorry. Yeah, he's Kurt Russell's kid, which I think is pretty cool. He's a pretty fine actor.
Cool.
Oh,
All
Now
right.
on to our double feature.
Yeah, moving on. We got episode 9. Seth and I got a little creative and we decided I wanted to do an exploration of the film Kids, which is a 1995 film from Larry Clark. Most of you probably heard of this film or seen it. It's basically it's a scripted film that seems like a documentary because the kids are basically playing themselves. It's just a bunch of bad kids in New York City being bad and misbehaving. These are kids from multiple socioeconomic backgrounds. And then I wanted to contrast it with the film that came out as the adaptation of the Bret Easton Ellis book Less Than Zero, which takes place in Los Angeles. So you have the two coasts. You have kids taking place in New York City, where I grew up, and I knew a lot of the kids who were in this movie. I was a little younger than them, but I went to school with some of the kids that were in this film, so it really hit home for me. But then Less Than Zero was like this sort of alternate universe 80s version of Kids that took place in LA that was much more geared towards like dysfunctional rich kids than kids from all different kind of backgrounds, which is a lot more how LA is. It's more cliquey. Like, when I was growing up, you had kids from you had the Park Avenue kids on the Upper East Side. You had the Lexington Avenue kids, the York Avenue kids, further and further away from Park Avenue. And then you had the Uptown kids from Spanish Harlem. And then, and all those different worlds were intermixing. The Less Than Zero thing was just like really excessive latchkey culture. These kids got these are kids. This film is like, and Bret Easton Ellis's book is really kind of describing, a culture of like rich parents letting their kids do whatever the fuck they want, and then they become dysfunctional, obviously, as a result of that. I thought it was kind of interesting to put these two films together, and I think they both had a lot of important things to say in a way about, or at least to paint I think they both painted really good pictures of the culture and how it changed from like the sort of like Rosemary's Baby era of like kids are like invading my body, and kids are like parasites, and like this sort of like this kind of like free love hippie thing, to like those people have grown up now and those kids are now young adults, and there's the kind of parents that this whole culture of rich American people just like letting their kids do whatever the hell they want. It's like Lord of the Flies or something. I don't even know, but I don't have that much more to say about it. I'm curious what Seth has to say, since we kind of went on this adventure together.
I remember rewatching Kids, and the opening sound of the two of them making out.
Oh,
it's so fucking disgusting. Like it sounds like an old man with no teeth and a lozenge in his mouth, just sucking it in and out, and I think you hear it before you see them.
Yeah.
And then it's just the two of these. Remember when you were a kid and you didn't really know how to make out, but you knew it felt good, and just you're making these disgusting noises, swapping spit, and then of course later you find out that this kid is giving AIDS to everyone in Manhattan. So there's that, and then Less Than Zero is just a really great, well acted 80s film. So I mean, if you look at them in contrast, you've got like this independent film where no one really has that much acting training, if any. And then you have another one where it's like, it's a studio film, it's adapted from a novel, it's been picked and cultured and adapted and cast, and these people know how to act. And, it's got the token beautiful sports car to show off that the kid is
like that 61 Corvette or whatever it was.
Yeah, and the making out in the Corvette thing, and that whole thing, and I really liked it. I just remember at the end though, when he's like, will you come to school with me, and she's completely destroyed over Robert Downey Jr., and then she's like, yeah, and then they get to the beautiful sports car, and drive off.
And they ride off into the sunset. I'll take it from there. But it's a happy ending. B, Jamie Gertz, the character you're talking about, had cocaine, saw what happened to Julian, played by Robert Downey Jr. She quits the stuff by putting it in the sink, and the two blondes are like, "What a waste!" So she's like, making a good transition into like a healthier life. I love this movie. I had it on VHS. I got it from the DVD store when they converted. They were converting. And I rewatched it again, and the costumes were great. The music was a great selection. The art direction was amazing. I believe the world fully. I believe James Spader as a drug dealer when the year prior he was in high school in Pretty in Pink. I believed both somehow. He was 29 in high school.
Best James Spader performance, at least of the.
He was brilliant. Even in the pool, he had the phone floating. He had the waterproof phone floating in the water, and he's like, "Who the fuck do you think you're talking to?" I thought it was great. Kids, I did not like it all. I do understand its chapter in cinema history. One of the things about films is that it shakes us to our core. Kids did that for a lot of kids, and if you don't have a story, just make it about AIDS. So there's that. Two, it cost 1.5 million, made 13 million worldwide. So it was a phenomenal hit. Phenomenal. Thank you.
Okay.
It's very difficult to find now. I remember when you guys picked this film, kids, it's so hard to find anywhere. It's like they don't want you to see it, or they don't want anyone to see it. I remember watching it. I grew up in Long Island, so the city wasn't too far off. We would go into the city sometimes. And I remember my friends talking about this film, and I remember being a little bit kind of horrified by it. I wasn't like a bad kid, but I wasn't really a good kid either. I was somewhere like in the middle, but I do remember it having that like effect on me. And I do think it's interesting. It's one of Chloe Sevigny. I think it is her first role.
That is
Chloe
her first
Sevigny
film.
And Rosario Dawson. And what I do like about it is that it is scripted, and it's very well acted when you take these non-actors. They did a really good job. They did a great job at casting it. Even the people that you don't like the lead character is like, ugh, gross. And he's supposed to be like this sex symbol, so that's weird. And then with Less Than Zero, I didn't like that film as much just because, I don't know, Hollywood is always like, it felt very Hollywood, and it takes place on the West Coast, and it just had that sort of like, I don't know, I think it's my own issues.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to say one thing. I agree with you, and I liked Less Than Zero, but of the two films, Less Than Zero made me feel way dirtier.
Yeah.
Because of the Robert Downey Jr. character.
Yeah, that's true.
Becomes a hoe.
Yeah.
Pay off his drug debt. I mean, to me, that's a much filthier movie.
Yeah.
Kids, it's only filthy to people because they think it's real. It wasn't a real movie, guys. They're real people. Those are actors, even though they're not trained actors. But anyway, yeah, I agree with you, Judy.
It's like Kids is like the 400 Blows.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, this is taking a little longer than I thought, and I think it's good that we're spending like 5 minutes on each one because I think it needs a little bit more of organic discussions that we've been doing. But I think we should do a part 2, and let's end with this let's end with this episode 10, which is basically our halfway mark. Okay. Episode 10. Very interesting selection. What Happens in Vegas?
What Happens in Vegas is an amazing, amazing romantic comedy. It made $200 million worldwide. It also has the honor of being the only Ashton Kutcher film I like. I love Cameron Diaz. She's a rom-com queen, only up there with Jennifer Lopez. I've seen this movie in parts. It's so candy for your eyes and wholesome for the brain, and it's just amazing. The storyline is simple. Two people meet in Vegas. They get drunk and get married. They don't like each other. He wins millions of dollars at a slot machine. Now they're ordered by Queen Latifah, the judge, to work it out in 6 months or nobody gets the
No,
money, so
they're
they're
not ordered
forced to
by
work it
Queen
out.
Latifah, the judge. They're ordered by the
Oh,
judge
right.
to go into counseling with Queen Latifah.
So I
Dude,
just think
this
she's
is your movie. Come on.
decisive. Well, I love. I got confused. She did seem like a lady boss. Maybe that's how I got it confused. But
was. Yeah.
I love this film. Rob Corddry is fantastic. Lake Bell is fantastic, and I did see Cameron Diaz and Lake Bell in one of the big bodega delis near Christopher Street. I saw her. I'm like, that's Cameron Diaz. I turned and I walked. Boom, down another aisle. That's Lake Bell. Uh-oh. And I just turned and I just left. I didn't want to flip out. Years later, I saw Cameron Diaz around her retirement in Central Park. She had wedges this big, bigger than my head, walking around. I love this film. Thank you.
I just want to say I love how much you love this film. I actually think that your enthusiasm for it and your fighting with other members of this podcast over it just makes me it warms my heart so much, because I love that magical, loving disagreement, right, that we can all have. It's a typical Hollywood film. It's two actors who are not good actors, but they're very likable, charming people. They completely overact. I remember Seth and I in agreement over this. They're just, hamming it up in their face, and they're just so terrible. And it takes one actor of Queen Latifah, I'm coming in with Queen Latifah as like this remarkable actress, where she just like makes one expression, like turns her head, and it's like brilliant. And you have them working. It's just that they're working so hard to perform. But you know what? Kudos to them, because they've made a magical career of it. I don't know why I'm using this word so much, but they've made a career of it, and people like them. And unfortunately or fortunately, that's what filmmaking is. That's what drives people to spend, $200 million to watch this movie, is that they like Ashton Kutcher. They like, Cameron Diaz. They just like them. So they like J-Lo, they're gonna go see their films, whether or not they're gonna win Oscars for their performance, which they're not going to. But it's just one of those films where it's enjoyable, it's entertaining, it's colorful, it's well paced. It's also, I think, the film that we talked about, where if you're studying screenwriting or filmmaking, the pacing of the movie and the way that the screen moments happen is like perfectly on point. So it's a great demonstration of like perfectly, almost too perfectly executed screenwriting. That's it for me.
I think we need to save Seth for last, so I'm going to go. I didn't have any problem with this film. It's just a romantic comedy. It's a well-written romantic comedy with two actors that are okay and are very likable, because they have, I don't know, they have the faces that people want to look at, that are relatable. Like they're not even, those two wouldn't even be good enough for Saturday Night Live, much less to be like serious actors. It's just is what it is. They are what they are. And I enjoyed the film. And I guess I didn't understand, like, other than the fact that it was critically panned, which I think was unfair, because why were the critics so hard on this film? I guess they didn't want to go and see a rom-com that day. And like somebody said, you have to see this and review it. And they were pissed off because they wanted to see some other shit, I guess. I have no idea why they hated it so much. There's nothing wrong with this movie. It's a perfectly well-written, funny, charming movie to take your girlfriend to after brunch on Sunday. And then, whatever. And
it also makes you feel happy.
Yes, I get
you
it.
Laugh,
but
which Seth does not enjoy.
But this is like, happy. Listen, guys, this is this film is a prime example of how like critics are completely out of touch with the like normal people who just want to go out and be entertained. Critics have no business reviewing a movie like this. Just leave it alone. Like, it's just a regular romantic comedy.
I think you can rate this against other romantic comedies and say this is one of the worst romantic comedies ever made, in which the two leads. I wonder if you cast two actors.
It's a slapstick, harebrained comedy.
I know, but I think two other actors, off the top of my head, maybe like Sandler and Aniston, could have done a way better job.
No doubt. But this is one of those movies, again, where like we're gonna butt heads, you and I, because I can enjoy a movie with a good storyline and shitty acting. I'd rather see a movie with an entertaining storyline and horrible acting than a movie with great acting and a horrible storyline.
I
Sure.
think Lake Bell is so talented in this movie. I just want to get, and I give it up for. But the best thing about this movie is our show on it, where we corner Sean at one point, and he starts screaming about Stanley Kubrick. He actually compares
He thinks this
movie
film is like on the level of a Stanley Kubrick film.
Do you like the performances, Isaac, in a Stanley Kubrick film? Do you think they're good? So watch that and come back next week.
Yeah.
And
Come back next week and
wait,
watch us do
spoiler
our part
alert.
2 of the year in review.
Wait, spoiler alert. I won the argument.
Okay, fair enough. On that note,
the
guys,
evolution of the Sean character in this show.
on that note, guys, I think you understand who Sean is now and who we are, and we are what we are. And on that note, peace and love to all of you, and we will be back with part 2 of the year in review shortly.
And what's happened in Vegas should have stayed in Vegas.
Nobody can hear your duck call, Sean.